All right, well, welcome back. If you guys are here, it's because you made it through the first five presidents, and you should have a general idea of what's happening in the early 1800s. So let's get this going here with the age of Jackson. All right, Jackson is elected twice, serving from 1829 to 1837. So we're still talking about the early 1800s. All right, he was the first president that was elected from a state other than the original 13. He's a backwoodsman from Tennessee. And our story with Jackson begins in 1824. He actually will lose the election of 1824. If you do remember anything about Jackson, you probably remember him from being the hero of the Battle of New Orleans during the War of 1812, becomes a national hero, and eventually will become president. So let's deal with what happened here in 1824. There's an event known as the corrupt bargain. If you know anything about Jackson, your story must begin with the corrupt bargain. So what happened in 1824 was there was four presidential candidates who attempted to become president in 1824, none of which received a majority of electoral college votes. And the Constitution states you must have a majority of electoral votes to be the president. So what happens is you have these four guys: Henry Clay, William Crawford, John Quincy Adams, and Andrew Jackson, the dark horse we'll call him, who really didn't have a big part in American politics, but he's going to rise to the top very shortly. Okay. This is the election. So if you want to look at the breakdown, you have the electoral vote here. Obviously 99 and 84 and 41, 30. If you add them all up, no one has a majority. A majority would be more than half. If we were to look at the popular vote, it's pretty clear. 43% of America wanted Andrew Jackson, but the popular vote doesn't really matter. The Constitution states that you have to have a majority of electoral college votes. So if we figure this out, and by the way, Jackson's from Tennessee, he won his home state. So the corrupt bargain goes like this. The House of Representatives is going to decide the election. And they basically pick John Quincy Adams as president. Why did they do that? Well, Andrew Jackson had the most popular and the most electoral college votes, but that doesn't mean that he's going to be president. Okay, John Quincy Adams does become president, and he makes Henry Clay the Secretary of State. And really, Henry Clay at that time was the leader of the House of Representatives. He was the Speaker of the House. So Jackson is mad. He's I mean, he wants a piece of Henry Clay. He wants a piece of John Quincy. And yeah, pretty soon he's going to get that opportunity. All right. So corrupt bargain is real simple, right? Henry Clay, Speaker of the House. Jackson accuses him of using his influence to give John Quincy Adams the election. Jackson supporters claim that Adams and Clay worked out a deal, and they call that deal the what? The corrupt bargain. Despite their claims, the vote of the House actually picked John Quincy Adams to be the sixth president of the United States. He will only be the president for 4 years because Jackson is going to come back with a vengeance in 1828. Okay, what were the changes in politics during the early 1820s? Well, by the mid 1820s, most states said you did not have to own land to vote. Well, who began voting now? You had kind of regular guys who were voting. Guys they weren't very rich. They didn't own a lot of land. So you had a different class of people voting. And those people really voted for a guy who's kind of like them. And that guy is going to be Andrew Jackson. Okay. 1828, the number of voters was 3 times larger than it was in 1824. What's the change? You don't need to own land anymore. Okay. In 1828, Jackson really appealed to these voters, and they voted for Jackson in 1828. Okay. Also, selecting candidates became more democratic. So you have two different definitions here. The old way, candidates to actually run for the president were actually selected by their political party. They kind of handpicked people, and they're like, listen, we think you can win, we want you. Now, what's the new way? Candidates are going to be selected through a nominating convention, meaning that the people are going to actually vote for who they want to run for office. All right. Famous picture right here, right? It's called the election day here. You have all these people going to vote, and if you take a peek, right, this guy's drunk. I mean, he's not even sober. He can't even stand up, but his buddy's grabbing him, and he's bringing him up to vote. Okay. This guy obviously was in a fight. He's got a little bandage on his head. Right, these kids are gambling down here. They're playing dice. And this guy here, he's getting all sauced up. He's getting more to drink over here. And obviously you have the servant, which is, we still had slavery. He's pouring the grog or the liquor, whatever this guy's having. This guy's going to get up and then he's going to go and vote. Why is the painting right? It's showing us who is actually voting now. These people over here are looking at reading the paper. They're educated. They're going to make an educated vote. Now, they're going to obviously be the more prominent people. And then you look at this guy, and he's kind of rags, and this guy's all beat up. These are lower class people, but they now can vote, even though they didn't own land. So I love that painting. Nominating convention, need a vocabulary. You got it there. You can pause that. What is the mass politics or the rise of mass politics that happened here in the early 1800s? A couple things are happening. No longer did people rely on just their name to get elected. There were rallies and slogans and attacks on the other side. This is called mudslinging. We also were moving more toward a secret ballot, which is going to become more popular in the late 1800s. But political parties used to print their ballots in different colors. So when you went to vote, people know how you voted. And if the boss man was watching and you didn't vote the right way, maybe you lost your job or something, okay? Only after the Civil War did the secret ballot come into general use, but certain states certainly began moving towards that, okay? Some more vocabulary for you so you can pick up on that if you need it, all right? Something's going on called the spoils system, okay? And what the spoils system was is when you got elected, you were able to give jobs to your friends, okay? So the spoils system is associated with Andrew Jackson, but it's been around even before that. I mean, when you got elected, you gave your friends jobs, all right? So you look at the spoils system down here. If you win the presidential election, you know, that candidate, you get to give certain jobs to your supporters. Well, they will be your friends. They say it began with Jackson, but you can go all the way back to the George Washington days, right? The rationale for the system is simple. The government remains responsive to the people, assured the loyalty to the president, and party support will increase, okay? Why is it called this, the spoils system? Well, there's an old saying, to the victor belongs the spoils. The spoils are the rewards. So if you win the battlefield, whatever is left on that battlefield, you get to keep, okay? Now, the spoils system will be fixed, but not until the late 1880s, okay? In 1881, Charles Guiteau actually will shoot the president, James Garfield. Why? Because Guiteau did not get a job that he thought he was promised or something. Well, James Garfield can't fix it because now he's shot and he's dead. But Chester A. Arthur will create what's known as the Civil Service Reform or Commission. And what that does is Congress created the law known as the Pendleton Civil Service Act. And what that law did was it provided that we're going to create exams. So instead of the government just giving you a job, now you have to take the exam. And if you pass, you show that you're qualified, and that's who we're going to hire. So it set up a certain commission to administer and create the test. And it banned the common practice of forcing government employees to give money to political parties. So no, you can't just, hey, here's $5,000 to the president and just give me a cushy job so I don't have to work that hard. No, no, no. Today now, what is it? It's called civil service. You take the test. If you're qualified, you get the job. You got it. Okay. Jackson's going to have a couple issues that he has to deal with. And we'll go through them one by one. Right? It's not too bad, but there's pretty good stuff. So we have this issue of states' rights versus federal supremacy. And if you paid attention during the Union on the Constitution, you'll know that the federal government is more powerful than state governments. The federal government should be more powerful than state governments because it's above it. Okay, so the debate is going to range over the balance of power between what states can do and what the federal government can do. And if you keep in mind that the federal government always has more power, this is easy. All right. Certain states, as certain students and people, they believe they can do whatever they want. Well, saying you're going to do something and actually doing it is another thing. So we're going to get into it. So from 1820 to 1865, this debate centered on three key issues. First one is nullification. And if you need to define it, the definition's coming up. The other is protective tariffs. Lastly, the spread of slavery. Well, certain states feel they don't have to follow what the federal government says about these things. They're going to do whatever they want to do. And we're going to see how that plays out. Okay, so the first issue is the tariff, right? Southern states hated it. Northern states loved it. Keep that in mind, right? Why do southern states not like it? Because they think it benefits the northern factories. How does it do that? The price of manufactured goods will go up if there's a tariff. So in short, tariffs help the northern states, and at the same time, they're hurting the southern states. Because who's buying these manufactured goods? Mostly those southern people. So they feel now they have to pay more money because of the tariff. Well, who created the tariff? The federal government. So southern states begin to not really like what the federal government is doing. Okay, there's your vocabulary. So if you don't know what a tariff is, you got it. Nullification and states' rights, pause it if you need to. Okay. Now, what happens here in 1828? This is a phenomenal story, right? John C. Calhoun is from South Carolina. He is also, here's where things get a little crazy, he is also Andrew Jackson's vice president. So he's from South Carolina, but he's Jackson's vice president. And he absolutely hates the Tariff of 1828. He actually calls it the Tariff of Abominations. Now, an abomination is something that's very bad. He just does not like it. So what's Calhoun do here? He argues that a state has the right to nullify. What's nullify? Nullification? They're just not going to follow the federal law. And he just says states cannot follow any federal law that they don't like. They feel that those laws are unconstitutional. This becomes the theory of nullification. Now, you and I both know your Constitution because you learned it, right? Can states disobey the federal government? The answer is simple. The answer is no. But what is Calhoun arguing? That the states should have a choice. We know they actually don't. So what does Congress do in 1832? They actually pass a new tariff. It was lower, but it still angered Calhoun. Why? Because he feels that it's hurting the South. Jackson says that South Carolina's response, Calhoun's response, is treasonous. He shouldn't say anything bad about the federal government. He should just follow the rules. And Jackson even threatens to go down to South Carolina with the federal army and hang Calhoun from the first tree he sees. What's weird is this guy, Calhoun, he's his vice president. Here's the president saying, I'm going to come and hang you. It's crazy, right? So how was it resolved? Or even was it resolved, right? What happens? Well, there's a guy that steps in, and that is Henry Clay. Congress agrees over 10 years simply to lower the tariff. This would calm South Carolina down, and it would also calm Andrew Jackson down, okay? At the same time, Congress also passes what's known as the Force Bill. And it's basically a slap to South Carolina. And it tells them simply, listen, the president has the power to enforce the rules. And if that means he's going to use the federal troops, then he'll come down there and do it. So you better follow the rules, South Carolina. We'll be watching, okay? What does South Carolina do? They take a step back. And they withdraw their idea of nullification, and they say they're just going to follow the rules. But then they nullified the Force Bill, and they say, you're going to leave us alone. We're going to do what we want to do down here. So we have this issue of this tariff, and it continues to kind of play a part in American politics until the Civil War. Think about it. This is an issue that angers the South, but helps the North. So this is going to play a part into, and the issue is never permanently settled until the Civil War. All right, that's when it really happens. So that's the first issue. Let's deal with the second one, and that is the national bank. All right, our government has created a national bank going back to the Alexander Hamilton days. Okay, so now the bank's been around, and Congress says, well, we should keep it around because we think it's good for the country. So the second bank of the United States provoked sectional differences. How so? Let's look at it. Most of the opposition to the national bank came from Southerners and Westerners. Why is that? They think the national bank only benefits the rich traders, the merchants, the people in the urban centers and the cities. So Southerners don't like it, Westerners don't like it, right? Jackson from the West, he from Tennessee, he doesn't like the Bank of the United States. He referred to it as this like wall of privilege, and it's just bad for the country. So there's a bill in 1832 to recharter the bank, keep it around for longer than it needs to be. What does he do with it? He vetoes it. He absolutely does not like this bill. So what he did was, after he vetoed the bill, he actually takes the money out of the national bank and puts it into these smaller banks. He refers to them as pet banks. All right. They're state-run banks. The money's not in a centralized location. It's a little tougher for the government to keep an eye on it. And chaos begins to happen with the economy. Okay. The action will cause what's known as a financial panic and an eventual depression. Who caused it? Andrew Jackson. He doesn't get blamed for it because by the time that panic happens and that depression happens, he's no longer the president. But did Andrew Jackson kill the National Bank? Absolutely. Okay. We'll move on here. The last issue with Jackson's a tough one. Okay. Andrew Jackson is a galvanizing figure. He has an adopted son who's half Native American, but he also hates the Native Americans, and he thinks they need to get out of our way. His great quote one time, Jackson said, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian." So that gives you an idea of Andrew Jackson and Native Americans. So how does he deal with them? How does the federal government deal with them? As American settlers began to move further west, I mean, we just keep moving. There's conflict with the Native Americans. Why? Well, we're taking more and more land. So we're moving west. Natives are there. I mean, that's the issue, okay? There's one Native American that we should know of, and that is, this happened before Jackson's time, but in the early 1800s, two Shawnee brothers, the Prophet and Tecumseh. Tecumseh will die once again in the War of 1812. They tried to actually create a pan-Indian movement, and that is get a bunch of Native Americans together, bunch of different groups banding together so that they're stronger. All right, this movement is going to die with Tecumseh. He doesn't make it out of the War of 1812. The white settlers continue to move westward and continue to encroach or push out the natives that are there. Okay, so I mean, this is kind of America during War of 1812 and a little further past that. Look at this land over here. I mean, look at it all. This is all Indian territory. And if those Indians were able to band together in this grand conglomerate of Indian nations, maybe they could have fought back, but they don't get organized and it doesn't happen. Okay, there's obviously a bunch of other Native Americans down here. Look at Andrew Jackson during the War of 1812. He was known for really being very rough on the Native Americans. Hero of the Battle of New Orleans. He will later, after 1812, fight against the Seminole Indians down in Spanish Florida. So Jackson he's a beast when it comes to Native Americans. Doesn't like them. Okay. In 1813, the Creeks attack settlers in Georgia. So you have a Native American group who's attacking settlers in Georgia. The Alabama, in a series of raids, 1814, they were defeated by Jackson at the end of the War of 1812 at the battle called Horseshoe Bend. The Southwest was then open to settlement. If we go back, you kind of see it. That's going to be down here, right in Alabama. Jackson beating up Horseshoe Bend, cutting through, basically taking care of Native Americans along the way. So he's going to want to open this area up to white settlement, and that's pretty much what he does. There it is. There's all your battles down there in Alabama. Nice little map there. Now, what's going on up kind of where we live up in New York State, right? There was a Seneca named Handsome Lake. He urges the Iroquois to adopt a lifestyle based on farming, based on temperance, education, and peace. The lifestyle became known as revitalization, and he's trying to find a way to coexist with the white settlers that are there. And he did a pretty good job with that. So it's kind of a blending of cultures. We're gonna kind of adopt some of what the white people are doing, but still maintain our own cultural heritage. And he's like, we don't want to fight. Why? Because we're gonna lose, man. So let's gear up. Let's kind of coexist so that our lives can continue. The last group that we'll deal with is the Cherokee. Now, the Cherokee seem to have been the most Americanized Native American group. And they attempted to survive and retain their culture through what they called cultural adaptation. And what that was kind of like Handsome Lake, right? Combining certain elements of Native American and European culture. They even wrote a constitution. This strategy did not save them. They were more white than any Native Americans could be, and it still didn't save them. Why? In comes Jackson. Okay, so if you want to know where the Cherokee are located, it's going to be right in here, right? So you got this piece of Georgia, South Carolina, and that's kind of where the Cherokee settlement was. Now, what's Jackson come up with? And here's where the crux of the biscuit here. Here's where we have some problems. It's known as the removal policy. Well, you don't have to think about it. It tells you what it is, right? These Native Americans, says Jackson, says Congress, have to be removed, okay? The federal government used a combination of treaties to force Native Americans to move where? West of the Mississippi River. You gotta go, okay? These treaties were both unequal and worthless because Native Americans were even forced to give up lands they were guaranteed by those treaties. So even some of the treaties, the American government was not really willing to keep and to uphold. They're just like, you gotta go, right? Congress and Jackson passed the law. Congress passes it, Jackson's more than willing to sign it. You'll never forget it. It tells you what it is. The Indian Removal Act of 1830. It's pretty simple. They're going to remove them, right? In 1832, though, the Cherokee in Georgia actually go to court. They go to the Supreme Court. Actually, it wasn't the Supreme Court, it was the lower court, but it doesn't matter. They want to prevent Georgia from taking their land. Okay? The case is, worse claims that the state of Georgia and Jackson and Congress cannot touch the Cherokee territory. They got no authority, and the Cherokee can stay. So keep this in mind. Don't ever tell me the Supreme Court made a move. The Supreme Court said they can stay. Don't touch the Cherokee. And Jackson, the state of Georgia, simply ignored it. They said, we don't care. We're going to move you. All right? So there is the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw. These Native American groups in the Southeast and even the Seminole, they got to move. So where do they got to move? They got to move to what he called Indian Territory. So he made these Native Americans march and get on boats along these little rivers and actually go all the way, a couple thousand miles, to get to Indian Territory. The Seminole took a boat over here, then they had to march all the way to Indian Territory. It's pretty dirty, right? Something known as the Trail of Tears happened. So that is, after the Indian Removal Act, after the Supreme Court told Jackson to leave the Native Americans alone, after Jackson said they got to go anyways, Jackson ordered the United States Army and the state of Georgia to round up the Cherokee and force them to move west of the Mississippi. Where? All the way to Indian Territory. Here's the Mississippi, by the way, cutting out here. So here they were. They got to walk all the way to Indian Territory. Pretty dirty, Jackson, right? 25%. Or 1 out of 4 Cherokee would die on this walk. About 4,000 Native Americans are going to die. And there are certain Cherokee today, and Native American descendants of the Cherokee, they certainly don't like Andrew Jackson. He's not really liked by Native Americans. Okay, so there's the walk. So you got the Cherokee, boom. There they go. They got to walk, right, all the way to Indian Territory. It's terrible, right? Famous painting. You have the kind of the Native Americans. They're walking. Some of them are riding horses. This lady's crying. You can see it. And who's with them? Boom. Soldiers, right? Forcing them to make that trek, make that march. Pretty dirty. So Andrew Jackson, he is known as King Andrew the First. Why do we use this cartoon? Because it's phenomenal, right? Did he obey the Supreme Court? No, look what he's stepping on. He's stepping on internal improvements. He's stepping on the National Bank. He doesn't like the National Bank. He doesn't like Henry Clay. He doesn't like John Quincy Adams. And he's certainly not following the Supreme Court. He's doing whatever he wants to do. So that's kind of Andrew Jackson on the fly. All right. So test tips. If you're thinking about, learning about Jackson, you should know the tariff issue. You should know the National Bank issue, and you should know what he did with Native Americans. So good luck.